Good evening. I'm Haylee Ficuciello, and this is your Englebrook Independent News Federal Crime Report, bringing you the latest federal cases shaping law enforcement across the western United States. Tonight, repeat offenders illegal re-entering the country sentenced in Washington state. Major narcotic conspiracy dismantled across Oregon and Idaho. A high-profile Hollywood-linked drug case tied to a deadly overdose. Massive fraud scheme targeting federal COVID relief funds, and a sweeping immigration and cartel enforcement operation across the Southwest. We begin tonight in Pacific Northwest. In Seattle, federal prosecutors are highlighting two cases that say reflect a growing enforcement challenge, repeat offenders illegally re-entering the United States after deportation only to be released back into the communities following a state-level arrest. Two Mexican nationals, both previously removed from the country multiple times, now have been sentenced in federal court for unlawful re-entry. The first, 36-year-old George Velasquez Solanovo, has a documented history dating back nearly 2 decades. After being deported both in 2009 and 2015, federal records show the resurface again in Washington state. In October 2024, he was arrested in Sonoma County for domestic violence assault, but was released before federal immigration authorities could act. He was arrested again in September of 2025, this time for violating a protection order tied to the same case. Federal agents ultimately secured a judicial warrant, taking him into custody in February 2026. At sentencing, a federal judge stated plainly, he has no respect for the law, committing crimes every time he is here. Velasquez Falando received a time-served sentence of approximately 54 days and will now face removal proceedings once again. In a second case, also in Washington, 36-year-old Falafel Garcia was sentenced following a long history of driving underneath the influence offenses. Federal prosecutors outlined multiple DUI convictions spanning over a decade, including arrests as recent as 2025. Despite repeat arrests, Garcia was consistently released back into the community until federal agents intervened following his latest arrest in Lewis County. At sentencing, the presiding judge emphasized the danger posed by impaired driving, calling it a serious and ongoing threat. Garcia received 28 days time-served sentence and will also be processed for deportation. Federal officials say both cases underscore a broader enforcement issue where individuals re-enter the country after removal and continue to accumulate criminal records before federal interventions occur. In Oregon, federal prosecutors are reporting a series of significant cases ranging from large-scale narcotic distribution to violent armed offenses. In Yamhill County, 52-year-old John Billy Donahue has been sentenced to 10 years in federal prison after authorities uncovered a large methamphetamine distribution operation. During a 2024 search warrant, law enforcement seized over 1 pound of methamphetamine, multiple firearm and ammunition, digital scale, and more than $16,000 in cash. He will also serve 5 years of supervised release. In a chilling case tied to an organized drug trafficking, 25-year-old Fernando Cruz Lerma, extradited to Canada, has pled guilty to conspiracy charges. Court records reveal that during a drug-related dispute in 2019, a victim was transported across state lines and ultimately killed. Cruz Lerman admitted to assisting in disposing of a body along a rural road in Oregon. He now faces up to potential life in prison, with sentencing scheduled for July. In Opala County, 54-year-old Javier Vigil pled guilty during a trial attempted murder and armed robbery. Authorities say he entered a casino demanding $1 million, banished a firearm, and threatened mass violence. After fleeing with nearly $70,000, Vigil exchanged gunfire with responding officers. In Medford, a convicted felon, 31-year-old Devin Wright, has been sentenced to 70 months in prison after being caught with a firearm on 2 separate occasions. In one case, officers found a loaded pistol in his backpack. In another case, he attempted to conceal a handgun inside another passenger's purse during a stop involving a stolen vehicle. Federal authorities say these cases reflect the continued overlap between narcotic trafficking, firearm offenses, and violent crimes throughout the Pacific Northwest. In Idaho, federal prosecutors are dismantling a large-scale methamphetamine trafficking network operating throughout the Magic Valley. During the investigation, authorities seized more than 30 pounds of methamphetamine. At the center of the operation, 33-year-old Oscar Perez Gomez sentenced to over 24 years in federal prison. 9 additional defendants have already been sentenced, with prison terms ranging from probation to more than 13 years. Several individuals traveled across state lines, including Arizona and California, to transport narcotics into Idaho. In a separate case, 40-year-old Alicia Ortiz received 12 years in prison after investigators discovered methamphetamine and over 1,200 fentanyl pills inside a storage unit. Authorities say the drugs were intended for distribution within the local communities. Federal officials continue to emphasize that the synthetic drug, particularly fentanyl, remains a primary driver of overdose deaths across the region. In Los Angeles, a major federal sentence has closed a chapter in a case tied to a 2023 overdose death of actor Matthew Perry. 42-year-old Jasvine Sangha, known as Ketamine Queen, has been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Prosecutors say Sagna operated a large-scale drug distribution network supplying high-end clients, including ketamine that contributed to Perry's death. Court records show she continued operating for years despite knowing the risk of associating with drugs she distributed. In Santa Ana, 48-year-old Justin Cortez has been sentenced to 18 years in prison for operating clinics that issued fraudulent oxycodone prescriptions. Investigators say the operation distributed thousands of pills throughout fake patients and shipping them across the country. In Riverside County, a federal arson case is unfolding after a warehouse fire caused approximately $500 million in damages. Authorities allege the suspect intentionally set multiple fires inside the building and documented the act on social media. A former National Guard member has been found guilty of sexually abusing a subordinate during a training mission. He now faces up to 2 years in federal prison at sentencing later this year. In Nevada, a businesswoman has pled guilty in a $15 million COVID tax fraud scheme. Prosecutors say fraudulent filings resulted in more than $7 million in federal payout tied to pandemic relief programs. Meanwhile, federal agencies 30,000 fentanyl pills, heroin and methamphetamine, and over $30,000 in cash. 2 defendants now face potential life sentence if convicted. Across Utah and Arizona, federal task force continue aggressive enforcement operations targeting drug trafficking and immigration-related crimes. In Utah alone, authorities seized 50 pounds of narcotics in just 2 days. In Arizona, more than 170 individuals were charged in a single week, including illegal re-entry, smuggling, and trafficking offenses. In New Mexico, over 100 illegal re-entry cases were filed in just 1 week, many involving individuals with prior violent criminal histories. In Alaska, a man was sentenced to 18 years for producing child sexual abuse material, while another defendant faces up to life in prison for fentanyl trafficking. From narcotic trafficking and violent crimes to fraud, immigration enforcement, and public corruption, federal authorities across the western United States continue to pursue cases with wide-reaching impact on public safety. I'm Haylee Ficuciello, and this has been your Englebrook Independent News Federal Crime Report. Stay informed, stay vigilant. Good night.